Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, Professor. I'm Nick Jones, this is Ashley Arnell, Will Fouche, and Juliana Castro. And tonight we're going to be giving a presentation on proxemics and performer identity in street performance culture. Next slide, please.
By nature, street performances are a lot more informal than regular stage performances, ones that you'd have to go and buy a ticket for. And because of this, the dynamic between the street performer and the audience member needs to be a lot more close-knit in order to receive support. The street performer has many different tools in order for achieving this. They have the use of proxemics, which is the distance between the stage performer and the audience member, as described in the book by Hall in 1966, called A Hidden Dimension. But now we have our own responses to these as an audience member, we have our own responses to their performance. We can either express pleasure by giving them tips or showing them other forms of support, or we have displeasure. And through the book of Bridget Young Feldman in 2005 called The Art of Nonverbal Communication, every culture has their own way of expressing displeasure. But everyone can, so on and so forth, they can just walk by and not give them attention whatsoever. And through the identity of the street performer themselves, their use of proxemics, and their ability to create a strong stage presence leads us to our research question. How are the dynamics of proxemics, nonverbal communication, and identity characterized in the culture of street performance?
For our methods, we decided that the perfect setting to research our research question would be Third Street Promenade. And as Garvey, in his 2013 LA Times article says, there's too much going on. And the reason he says this is because there's one performer on top of another performer, and they're all mixed up in one long strip of the street. And this was the perfect setting because we knew that no matter what, at what time we went, there would always be a performance going on, and the whole environment and culture of street performance would be present. The way we decided to take notes was through note-taking on an actual notebook or also on a cell phone. And one of our group members also decided that he'd rather take pictures to remember what he saw there. We took an etic role in which we only observed and separated ourselves from our subject matter, but the only time we left this role was when we interviewed a middle-aged man who was observing a group of dancers. What was interesting to us about this middle-aged man was that he seemed kind of out of place in accordance to the performance that he was watching, and he seemed like he was thoroughly enjoying it. So we asked the man what he found interesting about this performance, and he said that the dancers were very inclusive of everyone, and they actually invited the audience to be part of the performance that they were doing, and it just created an environment of community in a simple moment in the street.
All right. So for our three main points, we really wanted to highlight proxemics, stage presence, and identity. Those were the things that really stood out to us as we walked up and down the street watching all of these performances. So one thing that we found really interesting about proxemics was there seemed to be two different types of performances. There were circle shows and walk-by performances. So circle shows were typically dancers, magicians, things like that would attract a large group of people, and they usually had a solid beginning, middle, and end. And people would gather around and then tip at the end of the performance. Walk-by performances, however, would usually be like a singer-type person, and where there's no real beginning and they're just kind of adding to the ambience of the atmosphere. And so people usually didn't stand by and watch very much. There wouldn't be like a huge crowd around them, but they would be receiving a fairly constant flow of tips. The performer's stage presence was very important, and so we wanted to talk about the audience interaction and the audience's engagement with that street performer. And the way that they got the audience engaged was through a ton of nonverbal communication. So this performer would gauge the mood of the audience and then kind of reciprocate with a really upbeat, trying to get the audience engaged. And the more engaged the audience was in the show, the longer that they stayed, typically, and the more that they tipped. Next slide, please. The last thing that really popped out to us during our field experience was the identity of the performers. In Mason's book, Street Theater and Other Outdoor Performance, he says that identity is the main attraction of a street performer, and it can really sell or make or break the show. And we did notice that a lot, especially with the marketing of oneself. So a lot of these singer-songwriter, this guy was selling CDs. And so he was really promoting himself. He was talking about like, hey, I'm Sam, this is my little brother. And so he was really trying to engage with the audience. He was trying to form the sense of identity with the people in order to sell his CDs and get more tips. And it seemed to be working. He had a fairly large group kind of gathered around watching. Slide.
So which brings us to our analysis. Once again, these are the three main areas of concern which we looked at in our study: the proxemics and the distances between the performers and the audience and how that affected them, their stage presence and the involvement of the crowd, and then once again the identity, or as Ashley said, how the performers marketed themselves to their audience. This quote, taken from Pickering's book in 2005, The Key Concepts in Drama and Performance, once again reiterates the necessity of that audience-performer relationship, saying that the essential concern is finding the proper spectator-actor relationship for each type of performance and embodying the decision in physical arrangements. And we really found that that was the key, that every single performer in some way or another tried to read that particular performance, read the crowd at that time, and embody that in their physical decisions during the performance. However, there were some differences. Some did it better than others, which I'll go on to talk about in the conclusion. Next slide, please. So the literature, a lot of the readings and research which we did suggests that the greatest control for a performer comes with solo acts, because the solo acts are not sharing the stage with anybody. The solo acts can direct all of their energy at the audience and in turn have that be reciprocated in a very positive performer-audience relationship. And there were definitely performers who did that. There were single acts who had quite a following of people. But we actually found that in our group's findings that the best results, the largest audience, the most attentive audience, and the ones that stayed for the longest was with a group of hip-hop artists down near the very end of 3rd Street Promenade. They were a group of 5 dancers who really, as we found, blurred the audience-performer line. They would take turns being in the limelight. During when one guy was in the center dancing, the other dancers would sort of join the crowd. They used proxemics to get really close to the audience, blurred that audience-performer line, and almost showed the audience how they should be responding to their fellow dancer. And as the man who we interviewed said, he really enjoyed that. He liked the inclusive atmosphere, and the rest of the audience really liked being involved as well. So thus we concluded that that blurring of the audience-performer line was the best formula for proxemics and identity, was the best formula for getting an engaging audience and a good performer-audience relationship. These are our references, and that concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for watching.